Hello and welcome again to Between Two Caricatures. I'm your host Larry, and with me is
I'm Steve.
Steve, the awesome man Taylor. I don't know. I need to watch uh full Home Improvement again and come up with more Al Borland style jokes. All right, and also as usual, this episode is not yet brought to you by Liquid Death. Murder your thirst. We've been seeing them tweets with links to the show. They're not biting. I don't know why. What do you think, Steve?
It's either they don't have enough money since the demand from all of our plugs is just they're too busy in Austria. Hans and Franz are pouring all that water into cans, or they're ignoring us. Yeah, that would be a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, or we could just be too metal for them. With all our talks about stocks and U.S. politics, it's just too metal, far too metal. But speaking of politics, Steve, we'd like to give our listeners the idea of what we're talking about today.
Well, apropos of nothing, we thought it'd be interesting to talk about the filibuster today. And as you may or may not know, the filibuster is a parliamentary tool in the United States Senate, which, as demonstrated in a movie starring Jimmy Stewart as the leader of a Boy Scouts offshoot group that wanted to build a camp or something, it allows one senator to stop whatever's going on the floor of the Senate. And it was just a technical, something that technically was possible until the 1830s when it started to emerge. And it grew in its use a bit. In the Jim Crow era, and especially later in the post-World War II era, it was used a lot to stop civil rights legislation. Excuse me. Today, it's just an abusive tool that's being used by the turtle, everybody's friend, Mr. McConnell. He's threatened if we get rid of the tool he uses to stop everything going on in the Senate, he's going to stop everything going on in the Senate. And somehow, Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader, I guess maybe he got some guts from watching Amy Schumer and her COVID lockdown show, Cooking with Amy Schumer, where she learned new skills. Learned the skill of standing up to Mr. McConnell, and basically everybody in the Senate, in the Democratic side of the Senate, is like, yeah, tell me another one. How's this going to be different from what you've been doing since famously in 2008, Mr. McConnell said that my whole goal is to make Obama be a one-term president, and who cares what it's going to do to the United States. And they want to try to make Mr. Biden a one-term president. But it looks like Biden's approval ratings are doing pretty well. So if he can keep it up, we might not be successful. However, if they keep anything new from being done by the Democrats, they might be able to use their old tricks and portray Biden as a do-nothing president. Remains to be seen.
That's possible, but I think we kind of got off track here, just by hair, because the filibuster itself is the main topic, and obviously they're trying. Biden is obviously the Republicans are going to do whatever they can to stop Biden, just like the Democrats. I wish I could say the Democrats did, but but the filibuster itself was originally created in 1806 by oh god, I'm looking at the page right now as I'm talking about this. 1806 through a rule change, and it wasn't really used, like Steve said, for most of the 19th and 20th century. And then mostly during the civil rights era, it got used a few times, including by Strom Thurmond, to block any civil rights bills that they possibly could. So starting in 1970, they came up with a, and I'm not making this up, they came up with a three-fifths compromise. No pun intended. So they came up with a three-fifths compromise. Basically, the idea was this. You have to have, you know what? I feel like we forgot something very important with all this, which is we're not talking about the damn filibuster. We're not. We're obviously the show is about the filibuster, but at this point, we actually haven't talked about it except for Jimmy Stewart, which leads me back to something we talked about in our first episode, which is what is the filibuster and what does it do? And as I said then, we're not actually talking about the filibuster. We're talking about cloture. Cloture means that you have three-fifths of the present senators there and they agree on something. That's really what we're talking about when you get down to it, right?
Moving the bill or not moving the bill?
Well, moving it to a vote. And there are two things that I think get. I mean, there's a lot of things I feel get ignored in this entire filibuster discussion. And one thing I'm going to state now, as Steve will attest, I don't like bad arguments. And I will bring up a bad argument later. And Steve, whenever I say I think that's a bad argument, how often would you say I'm right?
You're right.
Oh, this is why you're my co-host. But so basically, when we're talking about the filibuster, we're really just talking about cloture, and the cloture rule is that three-fifths of the present senators who are there have to agree on something for it to move. That's why you always hear it takes 60 votes to pass something. So that's the fact. I at least want to start with that before I start giving my opinion about this. And man, this is the type of thing where I just get angry every time I think about it. So it's a little hard.
I think something that you're missing is that the filibuster was rarely used, even during the civil rights era. We can, I guess, for my purposes, call the civil rights era 45 to 65 or 70.
Yeah.
And it's just been used excessively lately in the 1970s. I think it was in the 1970s. There was a rule change so that
1974.
you don't have to actually stand there and talk. Can I sit? Because I know in Texas, when a woman filibustered, she wore special shoes. Do you have to stand in the Senate, or?
Well, that's a really good. No, that's a good question. I believe at this point you just have to talk, and as we mentioned before with the filibuster, I said right now it's actually ableist if you have to stand the entire time, because not everyone can stand. And it wasn't until after the show, and I was talking to someone else, like, yeah, we have Tammy Duckworth who literally cannot stand. So I believe the rule at this point is you just have to talk the entire time if you do a filibuster.
Well, in any case, so in 1974, there's a rule change, and it just says, okay, I'm going to filibuster this, then it goes to cloture, and if you don't get 60 votes, your bill dies.
Right.
Without spending a few days in a sitting or standing position on the Senate floor, reading the phone book. And another key is like you don't have to talk on the debated subject. You can talk about anything.
I do not like them, Sam. I do not like green eggs and ham.
But do you like Cancun?
My lawyer has advised me not to comment on that situation at this point in time. How about that? As we make jokes about Ted Cruz.
A lawyer that's anywhere as capable as Mr. Cruz. I mean, the president appointed him to represent him before the Supreme Court on something that never got to the Supreme Court. I forgot what the case was.
It doesn't even matter. It's just Ted Cruz being an idiot. But back to this. So when we talk about eliminating the filibuster is the act where any senator on their own volition can stop debate on anything to bring up a point. I always bring up this one, which is the first time I saw it used in my personal lifetime was in 2013 by Rand Paul about the drone program during Obama's term. His concern at the time was the idea that a U.S. citizen could be killed on foreign soil without trial or charge. Two other examples of the filibuster. One would be by Ted Cruz, and I honestly, off the top of my head, can't remember why. And I know that Bernie Sanders also had a filibuster at one point.
Wasn't that recent, Bernie Sanders one?
It was fairly recent, but again, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. And it would be worth it's slightly worth going into, but really the main important thing from those three filibusters is they didn't stop anything. Things just kept going no matter what. Because the filibuster doesn't mean a bill's dead. It just delays it. Just like you said, Steve, it just delays it for a little bit. And
well, not necessarily, because if you filibuster a bill and if you don't get cloture, then it's dead.
Well, no, it's more like if you don't get cloture, the bill is dead. It doesn't matter if there's a filibuster or not. If there's no cloture, that's all that matters. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's why I always get mad about this conversation. Not with you, Steve, but I just mean in general, because
you can be mad with me. That's fine. See that we're not touching on,
right?
What does the filibuster do? It wastes time and it kills bills, and it gives people cover. A thing that McConnell has done is he's prevented lots of things from coming up to a vote that would be politically quite costly to his coalition if they came up to a vote.
Right, but it's all cloture based.
What?
It's all cloture based, not filibuster based. If it was based on the fact that, hey, if we're not going to bring this to the floor, and if you try it, we're just going to talk for as long as possible, so you won't be there to vote, then yeah, then they're trying to filibuster something. But if it's more like, you need 60 votes, and we're not going to give you the votes, and we're not even going to bring it to the floor because you don't have the votes, that's something else entirely. That's not the filibuster. That's lack of cloture. And this is what I mean by a bad, and this is not Steve making this argument. This is what I mean by a bad argument, though. Like, when people go, well, we can't do this because of the filibuster, it's not the filibuster, it's cloture. And it gets really frustrates me. Just in general. Just in general. But Steve makes an excellent point, too, which is a lot of it is, hey, you don't have 60 votes. If you bring it, we either will not bring it to the floor because it's not going to pass, so it's a waste of time, or we'll bring it to the floor, and definitely to Steve's point, we'll bring it to the floor, but we'll delay as much as possible by having a filibuster.
But the whole point of the filibuster in its original iteration, one assumes, is to make people say, well, you're stopping everything happening. This isn't a big enough issue for me to stop everything happening. Okay, I'll vote for it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the point of it. The idea is that, or also, and this is more ideally, and this is the Jimmy Stewart version, hey, you're about to do something really messed up. I want you to know this is really messed up, and I'm going to stay here and fight as long as I possibly can because I really believe in this, and this is really screwed up. Again, I gotta bring up Rand Paul for that one because it wasn't about anything else but the drone program. That's all he was concerned about. The idea that we could kill a U.S. citizen on foreign soil without trial or charge. And that's something that I gotta say, I'm all for stopping the Senate about that. I may not like Rand Paul, but that was a good point. Whereas I believe Ted Cruz's filibuster, I haven't looked it up while we're talking, but I think it was about the tax bill. It was more like, we want to make sure that we can pass our tax bill with a giant tax cut for the top 1%, and the Democrats are going to block it, so I'm doing this, or some crazy nightmare like that. They actually did it. And so, one more thing about the filibuster and related to cloture, it's really more cloture based, and I cannot stress it enough. But when we talk about actual filibuster thing, we will gladly say that. But related to cloture, Harry Reid. So right now, before I even go to that, there's been a lot of talk about abolishing the filibuster, and one thing President Biden has said was he's in favor of bringing back a talking filibuster, which is technically what it is, but because again, filibuster is different than cloture, and we're really talking about cloture here. But a really good example of what happens when you change the rules of the Senate because you don't like how it's going and you're not getting what you want would be, I believe the year was 2012 with Harry Reid. Am I right, or was it 2013?
I forgot.
I believe it was 2013. So for the purpose of this conversation, and please look it up, we might be wrong. Harry Reid had a problem. A bunch of judges were being nominated by the Obama administration, and the Senate Republicans would not let them through. You needed 60 votes to appoint a judge, and they said, well, no, we're not going to do that because, well, they're jerks. We don't want you getting what you want, and you need 60 votes, so we're just not going to vote for any of them. So they pulled what was known as Harry Reid pulled what was known as the nuclear option, which was instead of having the cloture of 3/5 of the Senate.
It wasn't a big nuke.
I'm sorry?
It was just a little nuke, not a big nuke.
Oh, well, the nuclear option was going for a simple majority. And, well, Mitch McConnell said the Democrats will rule this. Fast forward to 2017, and the Trump administration nominates a bunch of far-right people to go become judges, and they're approved one by one because, hey, you just need a simple majority, and the Republicans were in control. They got 3 Supreme Court nominees through, even though the Democrats couldn't get any of them through. I would say that sounds like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to correct myself. They got their judges through on the lower courts because of that. And I would make an argument that because Harry Reid did the nuclear option with the lower court judges, Mitch McConnell in turn said, well, you know what? I guess we'll pull the nuclear option for the Supreme Court. And thus blowing that up because the Democrats wouldn't go along with their judges. An argument. I'm going to stop there. Go ahead.
2012.
It was 2012. Okay. But I started talking about the nuclear option related to the Supreme Court. Yeah. Do you want to take that one on?
And they're talking about modifying it more, that we're going to get rid of the filibuster for voting issues, and we're going to get rid of the filibuster for citizenship issues and statehood issues, and maybe we need that's the only way we'll get rid of it is by this creepy incrementalism. Maybe it'll take 50 years to get rid of it.
Well, let's start with this. And again, this is not the filibuster we're really talking about. It's cloture. That's all we're really talking about in the end. Well, let me ask you this. I'm getting frustrated because it feels like we're talking about one thing, but we're calling it something else. To your point of it feels we're going to get rid of the filibuster. Where might I have a blind spot on this? Based on everything I said, where could my blind spot be here?
Well, the filibuster is a tool to lead to cloture. It's a way to put off making that call, I guess. It's your blind spot. But you're right, that culture is culture. Excuse me.
I think we both got it wrong at least twice so far.
It is what filibuster is about, but how we get there. And
I appreciate that.
Filibuster ad infinitum, you prevent cloture from occurring.
Well, you can delay it. It's not like there's no closure after because of it. It just winds up delaying it more than anything else, um, and that can cause its own problems. And one thing I would mention related to this would be, I mean, I'm kind of skipping to the end of the show. I don't really mean to, but I keep bringing up it's 3/5 of the senators present. And I keep mentioning that for a very specific reason, which is it's not actually 60 votes. It's just whoever's there. And you'll hear, if you ever watch a Senate proceeding on cable or on internet or anywhere, you'll probably hear there's a call for a quorum first. Basically, like, okay, allegedly the vote is, let's say, 60-40. Well, they call for a quorum, and if 100 people aren't actually there, then you kind of have a problem because you only have 90 people there, but you had 100 votes. It doesn't add up. But so one proposal they're talking about is really hammering down on the present aspect. So if all 100 members vote, they all have to be there, and if they're not there, it doesn't count. And that's kind of how the filibuster was working for a while. The idea was, hey, I'm going to take the floor for 24 hours. And my assumption is at some point, a lot of you are going to leave the room. Maybe you have to go to the bathroom. Maybe you got to sleep. Maybe your feet are tighter. I don't know. But the idea is you hold the floor as long as possible. So that way, when it comes time to do a vote, not everyone's there, and then you can get your measure through. That was part of the idea of the filibuster. We haven't had the stringent rule of being present anymore for the cloture vote, and that's a problem. At least I think it is.
The Senate has a lot of arcane rules, and the Senate is supposed to be the okay, maybe I don't have this.
The adults in the room?
Well, that's more modern, but the saucer to the coffee cup or teacup of the house.
Ah, yes. Whereas the house can
how
just
they drank tea in the day is you'd pour a little bit into the saucer and slurp it out.
Well, I learned something new.
And is this the role that the Senate should serve? Should the Senate be a more active, confrontational place like the House is, but have the members be a little more insulated via the 6-year term as opposed to the 2-year term? House members are constantly running for re-election. It's like,
yeah,
people in the Senate, at least you have 4 years. Obviously, you could never ignore it, but 4 years of reduced stress. But people in the House, it's like every minute that you're there. I understand every day they have like three or so hours of phone calls scheduled fundraising.
That's true. If you're a Democrat or a Republican or you caucus with either party, you are obligated by party rules to do fundraising. And that's, I didn't learn that until a few years ago. I think AOC became, after AOC got elected, the last week tonight with John Oliver did a story about that. And it just was like, wow, really? That's messed up. Even Bernie Sanders had to do it because he was basically caucusing and running in the Democratic primary. It was literally the cost of being a Democrat or a Republican. But I mean, I would hope that, yes, the Senate is supposed to be the more deliberate body. Adults in the room,
Are we going to continue that? Is it in fact a more deliberative body? And perhaps it is, and we're not seeing what it could be.
We're not. We've seen. I think there's a long list of reasons why it hasn't been that deliberate body for a while now. I think the easiest road, the easiest marker would be 2008 and Mitch McConnell's statement. That would be the easiest one. Obviously, it had been going on for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years before then. But I think that's a good starting point for it being as divisive as it is right now. And you have people who vote who I'm gonna go with the second impeachment for being a good example of what good the Senate can do and what trouble they're in at this point in time going forward. Because what we saw with the impeachment trial was the most bipartisan impeachment in the Senate in U.S. history. More Republicans switched sides so that they could vote for impeachment than ever before, and that was a good thing. What happened in turn were basically everyone who voted in the Senate for impeachment didn't have to worry about reelection. Either they were leaving the Senate or they had just been reelected. They didn't have to worry about it. Everyone else just freaked out about being primaried. At my 2 cents. But it also shows that ideally that's how the Senate is supposed to work. Even though you even though it's unpopular with your constituents, you're doing the right thing or you're looking out for their long-term interests, and it doesn't matter what party you're with, you're going to do the right thing. And everyone's terrified of doing that on both sides, but definitely on the Republican side, far more than the Democrats. If I don't do what I'm being told by the party leadership or some of the far fringes of my party of my party, I might get primaried and I won't get to do this anymore. And I think that has become the biggest threat to the U.S. Senate. The far reaches of the party, namely on the Republican side. I want to say a little bit on the Democrats, but I think it's a much bigger and dangerous issue on the Republican side. And I'm going to let you go on from here. I've gone on way too long.
The whole question of being primary brings up a question. Are the people on the far right, you can call them the Freedom Caucus or the GQP or whatever you want to call them.
Wait, real quick, I gotta say this. GQP just sounds like sheeple in a new form, but please go on.
No, I don't think so. But
let me put it this way: like tongue-in-cheek, a little sarcastic, like, "Oh, I'm better for saying it than anything else." I know the point. I think it's a valid point to say they're in line with Q.
Different group is the point. Then
I understand. It just feels like it just feels like
people is one group,
right?
And your caucus is another group, and they're together because it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend,
right?
But do they represent the Republicans or not? You add them up together and you look at the whole Republican caucus, they're going to have to decide, they meaning the Republican electorate, the all feared base, what they stand for. And by not standing up, obviously it's a pretty sweet deal to be in Congress. There's some pain in the ass aspects about it, but a lot of it is pretty sweet, and especially in the Senate.
Yeah.
In the U.S. Senate long ago.
I mean, you get a guaranteed job for 6 years, healthcare, dental, a nice salary.
Well, all these people are such that they all have that anyway.
True.
AOC, well, she's different. That's a big thing that AOC represents. Fetterman, you think, oh, he's Fetterman, for those that don't know, is the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. He's mayor of a small working class town, was mayor of a small working class town in Western PA that was kind of run down. But he's a rich boy's son, and his father paid all of his living expenses, is the point. Fetterman is not AOC with a beard.
Yeah, I was going to say, you just made Fetterman's Democratic primary a little bit harder for him. But
Fetterman stands for. He hung the trans rights flag and the marijuana flag from his office in the Capitol, despite it annoying the powers that be. I am not speaking against him. I am just speaking reality, and I'm sorry.
Obviously, yes.
I'm sorry. I like Fetterman. I don't know enough about. There's somebody from Philadelphia is supposedly going to be running against him, and I don't know enough about that person to say who I'm going to vote for. But be it all as it may, the people that serve in Congress in general have a good salary, have health care, have vacations, and have staff for you to get to that place. And AOC is pretty unique, and I'm sure there are others like her. And I'm not just going to name the members of the squad, but there are other people like that as well.
Yeah.
But it still just sets you up for a K Street gig for the rest of your life. That's shorthand for being a lobbyist. If you are a congressperson, I don't know if the reciprocity goes to the other house, but if you are a U.S. rep, even though you're out of office, you have something that nobody else has. You can go to the floor of the House of Representatives. I don't know if you can go on the floor in the Senate. A senator can go on the floor in the Senate. And these are the only people that can do this. And when a bill is being voted on, you can talk to that person and say, hey, Acme Megacorp is really counting on you to be our guy on this one. And they're the only people that can do that.
Yep.
And that's what they're going to get. But the GOP has to decide what they're going to be. And maybe some people have to say, well, this is what I believe, and I'm going to stand up for it. And I don't support him. His name escapes me, but the Secretary of State of Georgia.
Right.
And that woman who, the investigator that the tape came out of her. Okay, kudos to Republicans in Georgia. It sounds like you guys are standing up for what our country stands for and what our country means. And maybe other Republicans have to say that as well and trust their fate to the voters as opposed to the what seems like the Republican battle plan, which is cut the electorate to rich white people.
Yeah, pretty much. It seems like in a lot of ways the Republicans are trying to go back to the voting standards of at least the early 1800s.
At least the early 1800s.
I mean, I would go all the way to the Revolutionary War, but I'm like, no, I don't think they're that extreme.
Quickly, what are those standards for our listening audience?
Oh, that would be white land-owning Americans. Only male though, but I think they're okay with
owning what?
What?
White land owning what?
White land-owning males?
Yes.
I'm sorry, cis males, because I don't think they're going to be cool otherwise, but hey, that's the GOP for you.
That actually raises an interesting point. You know, one could see an interesting historical document.
I'm going to leave it there, otherwise it'll probably go somewhere we don't want, but more importantly...
A whole another point with Betsy Ross.
So, in terms of the filibuster going forward, though, and again, not really the filibuster, more like cloture, I brought up Harry Reid, the judges, and what Mitch McConnell wound up doing with the Supreme Court. And I bring that up because I kind of see where this could go, and I don't want it to go there. And when they say we're going to abolish the filibuster, they're not going to abolish the filibuster. They're going to change the cloture rule. And I am terrified of them changing cloture to a simple majority. I really am. And every time I hear, oh, well, the Republicans can block everything because of it, it's like, no, they can't. And I feel like, do we have amnesia from the last 4 years under Trump? I mean, I know we want to, but do we have it? Because, oh, well, the Republicans can block everything. Then why didn't the Democrats do that when they were the minority? Well, Mitch McConnell was able to block everything. Right. And he was the majority, and they had the majority in the Senate. They don't have it now. We do. We can do what Mitch was doing for a while. Why don't we just do that? And everyone's like, but we got to abolish the filibuster. We can't do anything. The Republicans hold all the cards. And it is maddening to me hearing that argument over and over again about how we need to abolish it. Because what's going to
We
happen?
don't really hold the majority. It's a tie.
Right.
The vice president can't participate in everything, but your point is still well taken.
I appreciate that. And you already know where I'm going with this, which is the very second the Democrats lose that Senate majority, hopefully it won't be anytime soon, but eventually it will happen. Then the Republicans can just swoop on in and do everything they want. And even the loopholes we're coming up now, like, oh, you can only do it for voting. The first thing I thought of was then the Senate Republicans are going to come up with a horrible bill to make sure voting's very, very tough to do, because at that point, it's a simple majority. There's nothing stopping them. Oh, we can do it for immigration. Again, there's nothing stopping the Republicans from having a litmus test to become a citizen. Like, the very second you get rid of the cloture rule of 3/5, it's going to be a free-for-all, and it's going to just... I think it will absolutely destroy this country. I know that's really extreme to say. I know it sounds borderline like, come on, you sound like my great uncle. I know it is. It probably isn't going to destroy the country by itself, but it gives me grave concern. And I'm going to leave it to you, Steve. What do you think?
It'll be different. It's not going to destroy the country. It'll be different. And the people in the Senate are pretty smart people, exceptions to a good friend, the senator from Alabama. But
Which senator from Alabama?
They're pretty smart people, and there are lots of really smart attorneys on both sides that will find new loopholes for them to use to do whatever they want. This will work for a short while, and there'll be new workarounds. It's not going to be a revolutionary change. It will be for a few years, but they're going to figure out new things, and it's going to be an evolutionary change. And it's going to come down to, what do the people want? And I think even the Republicans, a lot of people will vote their party just because that's what they've done for 40 years.
Right.
But they'll say, I don't like the way this is going, and I'm going to vote for this Republican, not that Republican.
Well, let me ask this. I think you made a really good point, and I actually do feel a little bit better right now. Okay, so going forward at this point, I guess I was trying to figure out what question I want to ask, and this is the question I want to ask. If the Democrats don't do it now, what do you think may happen in 2 years' time if the Democrats lose the Senate? Do you think the Republicans would just enact it themselves, or do you think it may go away again and we won't have this discussion for a while?
If the Democrats do not make any changes, is that...
Yeah,
is that
so
what...
if they're... And I also, before you even answer that, I have to point out something to basically everyone listening, which is, even if the Democrats want to get rid of the filibuster right now, or the cloture, or change the cloture rule, they actually can't. And the reason for that is you need cloture in order to abolish it. So there's that. Because they've already set the rules for the Senate for this session, they can't just do it. It has to go to the full Senate for a vote, and you need cloture in order to do it, and it could literally be filibustered. So I just want to throw that out there. But assuming that the Democrats don't do it now, or they don't even try to do it right now, and the Republicans get back in power in 2 years' time or longer, whenever, what do you think would happen?
The Democrats, during the former guy's 4 years, seemed, with the exception of a few things like the tax cut in the Supreme Court and judges, to be able to stop a lot of the acts of the Republicans, and they'll be able to do it again. And I think what's being unsaid here, and maybe not even considered, is the Senate is not a representative body, because, and this is how it was designed, but maybe this needs to be adjusted. I don't know. How many people are in California? How many people are in our great Commonwealth? I think we've got 20 odd million, 30 odd million in Pennsylvania. California's 60 odd million.
That sounds about right.
How many people are in Wyoming or North Dakota, or name your favorite Western state? Less than seven figures. Many more people live in Philadelphia than live in North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, maybe combined.
I
But
wouldn't
they
go
all,
with combined, but I understand what you're talking
and they
about.
all get two senators. Every one of these states gets two senators. The Senate is not a representative body. The Senate was set up to be that way, to be a deliberative body. And the House is the representative body, and the Senate is, to go back 10 minutes, the adults in the room, the saucer to the cup. And perhaps our currently boring and tripping up president will calm down the rhetoric enough that in 4 years, maybe we could be back to a slightly more deliberative Senate, and the historical reason it is that way. And let's just, okay, in England, the House of Lords, isn't it, you have to be a lord? You know,
Oh, don't get me started on the House of Lords.
it's, you have to inherit your seat
Yeah.
somehow, your bloodline. Commons is G for us commoners. Okay, so let's look at another parliamentary system. Here I'm going to show I'm a fairly well-informed American. I have no idea. How is it done in Italy or Germany or Canada? Or
Oh God,
even
I have no clue.
a bicameral country, they've got the diet. I don't know if there are two houses in the diet. How do these other places do it?
I have
They
no
have
clue.
a lower house in a lot of these countries. Canada, I know, has two houses, but how do they differ? Can we learn something from looking at these other countries?
I think that's an excellent point, and I think that actually is where we need to start going with this. Offhand, I never really had much of a problem with the the two senator representation in the Senate. I understood where it came from. I'm learning new things about where it came from. Namely, like I originally it was like, well, we have two houses, and the way we're going to do it is everyone gets two senators because the House is going to represent everyone, the Senate's just going to represent the states. That's how we're going to do it. And then I learned part of it was also related to slavery because certain states were going to get a lot more senators because of the three-fifths compromise, and they weren't happy about that. But I think that it is worth looking into how we update the Senate at this point. But obviously, my leading question into this was: do you think the Republicans are going to get rid of the cloture rule if they get in power? That was my leading question. So, what do you think, real quick?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. Without wasting any more time, I could pontificate around, but I have no idea. I haven't really considered it. And I think it will depend, in large part, the dynamic we see in, I'd hope not 22 or 24 or 26,
Right.
is there. I've added myself as to my political leanings. Gee, surprise, surprise.
Right.
But the dynamic is going to depend on, our current president is very different from a lot of previous presidents. He might be back kind of like the Carter model, but I think he's proving so much more effective than Carter was.
I also feel like that's an understatement, but yes. And I'm sorry, I feel like I just cut you off. What was the rest of your thought?
So the gestalt is changing, and we can't really answer that. We have to see, what President Biden or the President Biden combination, our House of Representatives, the people in the House are really changing. Republicans are electing nut jobs, but a number of them are women who were not elected. I could not see the Republicans electing a woman from Western Colorado, but they will elect a woman from Western Colorado if she's a gun nut. So maybe they could elect a woman from Western Colorado who goes hunting and fishing with her family, and that's how they feed themselves during the winter. But maybe she is in favor of X, Y, and Z Democratic touch points, big Democratic touch points.
Are you saying the Democrats would nominate someone like that, or the Republicans would?
I'm just saying that the dynamic is changing,
Oh,
and
I see.
because they elected what's your name from Rifle that owns Shooter's Grill, and I forgot her name.
I know I get the point of what you're talking about, though.
That
I think our listeners do too, and I would say,
a woman,
go ahead.
and maybe they'll an elect woman who is for drug decriminalization and who is for, we'll call it something else. They obviously can't call it Obamacare, and maternity leave and sick leave and incrementalism, moving back to, for lack of a better term, a Rockefeller Republican.
Okay.
That maybe that's where we're leading to.
So
I hope the Democrats don't go crazy and AOC becomes a rightist member in the Democratic worldview. I think AOC is great that she's there, and notice she's playing the game and she's not making a big stink the last months. She's still a leader.
Yeah.
And I think she did great things in Texas, partisan things. The Republicans are right, it was partisan, and she made headlines for us, along with, I'm doing terrible with people's names now, the thin, tall guy who ran for governor, and they're talking about him for the Senate.
Oh, Beto O'Rourke.
Beto O'Rourke.
The guy who was so unpopular. The guy who was so unpopular he couldn't beat Ted Cruz. Go on. I'm
very popular. Ted Cruz represents a certain population.
I know, but go on. I'm making a quick joke.
Might have been, you can kill bacteria and virus by heat, and you can also kill them by freezing them.
I see what you did there.
So maybe another few percent in Texas is going to change. And for a state like Texas, it's going to be hard in a lot of places for a Democrat to win in the House. But statewide seats, maybe you got a better chance.
Well, I was going to say it's actually easier for a Democrat to get elected in the House than the Senate because it's a statewide race for the Senate. But I do hear
state it is.
Sorry?
And in Texas, they've got a lot of people from San Antonio and Houston and certain parts of Dallas.
Right.
That are mainline Democrats. And then you have people, I can't say a city, from East Texas or from the Panhandle who aren't.
Right.
Louis Gohmert, we're looking at you.
So basically, what you're trying to say, I'm sorry to kind of put it that way, but to kind of wrap up your thought, it sounds like what you're trying to say is, you can't make a determination if the Republicans would abolish it at this point in time because you see the face of the Senate overall changing, thanks to the leadership, basically based on the overall culture, along with the fact that they don't have an enemy in Joe Biden that they had in, say, Obama. It's
but
not
this
as
is
lightning.
The epoch where we're in. We had a stable epoch.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
From World War II until Reagan. And then we had a pretty stable epoch from Reagan until now. And now we're moving to another paradigm, to use all my big multisyllabic words.
Right, and I think
So let me see if I can get into college. I'll write that on my SAT essay.
I think the one thing that to this particular epoch that is freaking out everyone, left and right, is the idea that they're not seeing it the way you are right now. They're seeing more of a the Republicans are going crazy and they're going to destroy the country in the next 4 years. So we got to do everything we can do now to make sure that doesn't happen. I, I I can definitely see that viewpoint, but I can also see your viewpoint of, well, it's actually getting a little bit better, and now that the Republicans don't have. Go ahead.
In my inability to predict what's going to happen because of moving into a new paradigm. And I do not take the Republican threat lightly.
Right.
They're not going crazy. They are crazy. They are in the death throes of the current Republican Party. A cornered animal will do anything. They are currently a cornered animal. And all the voting restrictions that they're putting in, guess what? I think it's going to hurt Republicans. It might be a 40 to 60 split, but it's going to hurt Republicans too, because who was the party that supported vote by mail? Who's the party with all the old people who can't get themselves out of the house to vote?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the other thing too is, I'm glad you said that about the death throes of the Republican Party. I mean, I never write them off because I can't tell you how many Democrats said that in 2009 and that bit them in the butt. But it's more like we are seeing a collapse within the party right now. I'm not going to say it's over because I've said that, it's been said more times than I can count and everyone's been wrong. But we are seeing a giant transition in the party that could mean either it's doom or it's transition into a very, very far right organism. But back to the filibuster, kind of wrap this up because I feel like we've gone a little too far here. So, what's your final thought about cloture and the filibuster before I give mine? What's your final thought?
Change is coming. The Democrats are working very hard to create a working agreement of the 50 people there. Biden has things that he wants. He knows better than anybody in the executive branch ever how the Senate works, and especially how the Senate works now. We see after the tragic events in Georgia where somebody has a bad day and members of a minority group are gone, that a senior senator from California, a long-term institutionalist, has changed her tune. We're gonna see a change. There's too much pressure for it not to happen. Just like we see negotiation happening between the House and the Senate and between the Democrats and the Republicans in each house, inside the party, we're seeing negotiation of what the change is going to be. Remember, they're old people, they're mainly institutionalists, and change happens slowly. There's not going to be Bernie Sanders-esque change, but there is going to be change, and there is going to be change probably by the summer. That's my prediction.
Okay. I think that's a very fair and a very, very good prediction. I would say mine at this point is I'm not going to make a prediction. I'm going to just give my final 2 cents on this. And I would say I still think it would be a big mistake to end the cloture rule as it stands. And I think the best thing they could do is just make sure I would modify it a little bit. If cloture is 3/5 of the present members, it's 3/5 of the attending members. That's what it is. And making sure that's enforced more would definitely help a lot. That way, if a senator walks to the floor and you have the vote, they can't just pop in the last second, or maybe they can. I don't really know. I think the filibuster as it is okay. I think making sure you have to talk during the entire thing is a good way of doing it. And in terms of, I think it would be a big mistake to abolish it. the cloture rule at this point, because I really do see that just backfiring spectacularly at some point in the very near future if that happens. In terms of prediction, I think what's going to happen is I think Steve's right. I think what's going to happen is they're going to make some sort of agreement. I don't think it will be in a formal rule change, but I think there's going to be a behind the scenes, like, quote unquote, gentleman's agreement of how they're going to get a few of these things through. And we'll have to see what happens. All right.
With McConnell at the head of the Republican Party, I don't see any gentleman's agreement happening. And with Mitch McConnell's history, I don't see why anybody but a fool would trust him.
I have to say, I'm going to give you the last word. I think you got it right. All right. On that note, this is the shortest episode we've ever done, and we're going to try to make them this long at most. This has been Larry.
And Steve.
And we want to thank you for listening to Between Two Caricatures. We'll be back again next week with something else.
And we're out.